It is the Bylaws and Resolutions Advisory Committee meeting. Today, as I stated, is September 13th. This is a hybrid meeting. Anybody can come in. It is a hybrid meeting. As you can see, some of us are here in person, and we do have a guest online. So we have quorum, so we can continue and conduct our business. Let's do for the committee members, is it okay? Will you give your consent to have this meeting recorded? Since it might actually be a good idea, since they can refer to it, help with his notes later, if that's okay.
It's okay.
Anybody opposed to that, committee members? All right, so then we will continue recording the meeting. At this point, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Laura Pangraps, and I am the chairperson for this committee. I'd like my fellow committee members to introduce themselves. Whoever wants to start.
Joe Peloso, first official meeting.
There you go. Yes, that is true.
You guys are just finishing my second term.
Correct. All right, wonderful.
August Flingy.
Okay, wonderful. And then Camilla is excused unless she ends up popping in on the virtual. And then our board liaison, would you introduce yourself?
Steve Jacobs.
Got to remember what meeting we're at, right? And now we do have a couple of guests where our guests introduce themselves. Bob.
Bob Hilligus, former board member or committee member, I get it right.
And Jim.
Jim Powell, former committee member.
Here, because he's a little soft.
It wasn't you.
Okay, all right. Well, because with my hearing.
Yeah, it wasn't you.
Okay,
It was very soft.
all right. So we did that. We know that Camilla is excused. We did the guest approval of agenda. As the committee members were, you all received this at the beginning of the week. Was there any changes or anything that needed to be added to it? It should be a fairly clear-cut, fairly easy meeting. Is there anything that I'm forgetting? Since we had the month of August off, I got to get myself back into the routine of remembering what our status is on some of these things. So, anyone opposed to the agenda as it's presented? So the agenda is approved as well. Thank you. Now, the next thing we will do is they're technically discussion notes, not actual minutes, because at the July meeting, we did not have a quorum, but we did, Augie did put together some points. So technically, I guess we don't have, we're just giving our blessing on these discussions because they're not official minutes in that sense. Does anybody have any or see anything that needed to be corrected or amended? It was actually a short meeting.
I was in Iceland.
So, hearing no oppositions or any changes or additions, then we will consider these discussion points as approved. Does anyone have any problems with us having them added to the website? You know, like we typically do with minutes? Okay, all right, so then I will let Linda know that, so thank you. What I forgot. Wait a minute. You have to pull up the hold on. Because no, wrong folder.
Should approve the minutes from the June meeting.
we want
Did we approve, and did we approve the
the
minutes?
June meeting minutes
Okay,
because
that's what she's doing.
at July, we couldn't approve our June ones. So here are the June, actual minutes. So does anybody have any, see any corrections or anything missing from that one? Is there anything that needs to be changed for the June one? So hearing no additions, corrections, opposition on the June, the minutes from the June 21st meeting, they will also be considered approved. And I will send both the June 21st and the July 12th to Linda to have her add them to the website for us. Okay, so thank you very much. Now, next on the agenda is public comments. Does either of our guests have any public comments at this time?
I have nothing to offer.
Jim, do you have any?
No, I don't have any comments.
No,
What did he say?
said no
Okay,
comments.
all right. And then, all right, so next up, since there were no public comments, is the chairperson report. And here is my report. I have completed, and I emailed the following committee chairpersons on June 25th. I did budget and finance to find out the status of the update on that unnamed F resolution. I emailed the aquatics committee, the golf committee, art committee, and elections committee. I'll give updates on those as we go down. I also had emailed Michelle about our bylaw meeting dates for obviously September through December of 2024. I emailed her the approved May meeting minutes for the website, and then also emailed her to post the agenda for our July meeting to the website. I did watch the replay of the July 20th directors meeting, and also the annual meeting, because I was working the summer job on both of those, so I had to watch the replay. Couldn't live stream it or attend in person. And then finally, I did email Linda to post the recording from our July meeting, because it was not up there. So my task still to do, as I have added all of the new,
A lot of meetings to
I
go.
just cleared this list. And now we have a whole bunch of new ones now. The directors' meetings upcoming. So the next one will be the end of this month on the 28th. I should be able to attend that one.
Looks like they're later in the month this year.
I think so. It looks like they're towards the end of each month, unless there was a holiday one, you know. And gee, I can go to one on my birthday. No. I can't resist. I had to put that in there. So, look at that. I forgot to move the, April is actually in 2025, not 24. So I'll fix that later. Does anybody have any questions for me on what I have done? Okay. Go back over here. Steve, as liaison, do you have anything special to report prior, before we start doing business and it?
No, I don't, just, as we were talking before we got started, I believe, things, all the committee liaison assignments have been handed out, accepted, volunteered for whatever term you want to use. And so as far as I know, I'm still the liaison for this committee. I'm not anticipating any change, but nothing had come out yet, so I suspect something will in the near future, just to let everybody know, so.
Well, we endorse and appreciate you being here.
I'm assuming you're stuck with me for another year.
Oh, all right, well, thank you. So at this time, since we don't have any more voting to do right now, I will suspend Robert's rules so that as we move along, we can have, if our guests have any comments they would like to add, they can do that, okay? And yes, there are snacks, and if you want a fork or anything, the plasticware is right up there too. So, okay, so. But, beginning with the unfinished business status update. So I left the C14 Racket Sports Advisory Committee because as far as I'm aware, we still have not had a second reading presented. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but according to the bylaws, it should. But I'll leave it on there until we have a resolution on it.
So when you say B-01 states the requirements, I have the bylaws because I figured I'm gonna have a test someday, but where do you see B? I don't see any letters. So when you say B-01,
Oh,
is that in the bylaws or is that something else?
no, it should be in there. But they're in categories,
It's a resolution.
so.
Resolution.
I just usually find mine online, so I don't know how it looks like in the,
No, the bylaws wouldn't
The bylaws wouldn't have
won't
this
have
resolution.
resolutions. It'll be a separate
Oh, so
document.
it's not, okay, so it's not the bylaws.
The board of directors link at their website, it has all
well,
of
and
the
then,
resolutions categorized by letter, so you can bring them up on a computer.
but if we,
Talking about the
Oh,
one
B0.
resolution, which is the,
Oh, okay.
if you
Yeah.
go,
You can probably bring it up.
let me,
Book of resolutions, these are ones for this thing.
Okay. That's that.
the resolution.
If I may, I have, at the end of the July meeting, I spoke to council about the C14 resolution. And I also spoke to him briefly after, I believe, our organizational meeting. And I have not seen anything circulated yet, but he says, yeah, I need, he's aware that it needs to get done.
mhm. Okay.
I also sent him something else by email, which I'm beginning to think may have ended up in his spam folder, but I'm not sure. But I'll give Bruce a call and just touch base on that
Okay.
again.
Well, is he able to put stuff on the agenda? Or
No,
does he have to
he's-
recommend to somebody else to put
He
it on?
trying to think whether he in fact drafted or had provided information about what could be in a draft that he would do to
He had it set up.
alleviate the confusion in what happened with C14,
Right,
which he admits, we should have done differently. But he has a fix. We just haven't, the board have to
hasn't
vote
been-
on it. We haven't voted on it yet, and we haven't gotten it yet, as far as I can recall. So, I'll touch base with him again.
okay. And Joe, if you go onto the website, for whatever reason, I can't do it on, my Microsoft one. It does not like the website on that browser. I can do it from Chrome, but I can't share that on here. But if you go under the departments and click on the board of directors, and then when you go all the way, scroll past all the bios and everything like that, you'll see a section labeled governing documents. And then underneath that, it's got the book of resolutions, the bylaws, all of that is listed there, and you'll find the electronic copies of all of that. So under the resolutions, then in the bylaws, then you'd be able to pull up the actual wording of B01.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
So some still have summers, we still have a couple days left, the summer reading, right?
Yeah, so,
Or ordinance,
Showing them.
board of directors.
It's a handy reference for these meetings.
And then down here is general information and then governing documents,
Okay.
book of resolutions. These are one. And I don't know, can I search in here?
okay.
No, I don't think it's that long. But,
So we'll
First-
just, for status done, we'll just leave it on there until we, just
Yeah.
as a reminder, because honestly, if I take stuff off the agenda, I will forget.
Yeah.
You know, because, we have such a wide variety of discussions occasionally. So then, replies, that I received from the following committees. So the Budget and Finance, did respond. That was the chairperson is Doug Parks. He did respond to me about the unnamed F resolution. Said that they are preparing, this was prior to, he responded in before our July meeting or right after. But it was before the, elections had finished. And he said that they want to, do a first reading of it
let's do it.
and we'll present it to the board of directors
Second reading.
to become an official resolution. But due to the timing and everything, they were gonna hold off and it should be on the September agenda.
That'd be,
So if, that's at least the last update I had. If it's getting moved to October or whatever, that's fine, but the information that I know is the first reading for the new F resolution is gonna be at the September directors meeting on the 28th.
This is the unnamed one?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
So they're actually gonna turn it into a resolution?
yeah, and I'm not sure. I think the discussion was that it was gonna come up at the July meeting until I pointed out to them that we have to do it all over again in September, anyways, it's a new board.
Right.
Secretary.
I don't think that, I think originally the first reading was scheduled for July. That's come back, and so I'm assuming Monica will take, I mean, she's the liaison. so I'm assuming-
Right, she, yeah, Monica's
Yeah.
the liaison. At that time, I would assume she still is now. So we'll leave that one there until after we find out what happens at the, September directors meeting. But that one sounds like it should be okay. Golf, I had no response. Aquatics, said they were to have met in July, but I didn't receive an update. So part of me on, based on our criteria, if we don't get a response, then, I mean, they acknowledge the email. So hopefully they looked at it during their July meeting. But if we don't hear back from them, we have taken that as there were no changes recommended and to just call it reviewed and move on. So I don't know.
Is
if
that
you
your
wanna-
second one? You sent them twice now, right? 30 days
So,
apart.
I have to remember.
You're supposed to give them two notices, one request to get number two, advising them what you're gonna do if you don't hear back.
Well, if I haven't done the second one, then I can always do one after this meeting for that.
Aquatics did meet this week. I don't know if this came up or not. Aquatics did meet.
Okay,
I
so
don't
maybe
think.
I'll just do a follow-up and since we know they've had a September meeting as well. ARC, I did not get a response from. Elections did respond, and then after their meeting, they did send me an update, saying that their committee as of August 23rd, 2024, are recommending no changes at this time to it. So it can be marked as reviewed as of
What date?
23-24.
8/23/24
Yeah.
reviewed.
Because that's the date of the email that I got from them.
Okay.
And then I just left the M09 search committee, lovely topic of discussion, as it's just gonna be a kind of a looming thing there until we figure out what the new board slash new board, not that it changed members, but it changed, there was a little bit of movement, on that.
Change leadership.
Yes. And then, so that's it on that. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? The updates? I can send the follow-ups, another one to golf, the aquatics and ARC. They would be the only three that we don't have official responses from.
Is M9 the one that Keith made the significant edits to, and we're sort of waiting on what's gonna happen with that?
Yeah, so we did 2 rounds on that, 2 or 3 rounds on that. I went back and tweaked it. So I mailed out, it's been over a month now, but whatever the last tweaks I did on it, I mailed it out to everybody. I don't know if any
7/12, I think.
That sounds right. 12. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm trying to remember, what did we talk about? Did we talk about
We were
sending
gonna-
it to the board as a suggestion? What did we talk, what did we say?
Again. I'm pretty sure we said we were
Well,
gonna wait.
since we didn't have a quorum at the July meeting, there
We
could be
couldn't-
no vote on what to do next.
Right.
So whatever took place was just in the form of a discussion.
Yeah, I don't remember what our,
This is from the minutes.
I mean, I know that we,
Down there.
Laura, can I make a comment?
yes, please.
Again, I'm just a guy in the peanut gallery on these meetings. My understanding was that the committee had essentially completed its work on M09, was going to simply wait until after the board election and the first board regular meeting to go ahead and I guess associated with that may be a charging document, but at least have the proposed amendments to M09 presented as a first reading. My impression was that the committee, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be further discussed right now, no, but the committee had finished its work and was just holding until a new board, whatever what it's going to be, was formally seated and ready to hear regular business.
I think that's correct. That sounds right to me. I'm looking, so this is not one of the ones where we actually had, looks to me, like an old charging document already that we could reference.
So
Right?
our June 21st minutes say that we had reinstated Robert's rules because at that meeting, the June one, we did have quorum and to reimpose to allow consideration of changes to M09. The committee determined that it would review the resolution after the election. So this is the first time after the election that we're meeting and make a decision whether to forward the edits to the board. The committee approved on a unanimous vote the revised resolution with some additional minor changes to be made by Keith.
And that was an actual meeting. That was from June rather than
Yeah.
July.
Yeah, that was a quorum meeting.
Right, that was the quorum meeting. The July one didn't have quorum.
So this meeting would be the one where we officially look at it and decide if
Or-
we're going
Or
to,
officially make the decision, are we,
gonna submit it to the
Right.
board.
or do we?
I mean, I
wanna
feel like
just
we looked at
wait
all the edits.
until- Or do we want to wait until October, to present, to send it to the board for, because obviously there's not enough time, it's not going to be on their discussion radar before the September meeting. So I think if any discussion were to be held by them, it wouldn't, in a meeting setting, it wouldn't happen until the October meeting at the earliest, would be my guess, if they're going to consider it. We could send all of these edits and they say, no, it's still fine the way it is, and not finish addressing it, but
So I was wondering if what we should do, and maybe this is what goes on a charging document, I don't know, but is like type up a summary. Because people who are not used to looking at this, they're gonna look at it and go, what did you do to it?
Right.
And some people aren't gonna bother to go back and pick out the old one and do a side by side, right? So, and again, maybe this normally goes on a charging document, I don't know, but just a quick summary of what did you do to this? Well, we took these out as redundant to this one.
Right.
We added this clarification, just kind of a high level, like executive summary of the changes to the document, to make it easier for them to review it.
Right.
Is that something that normally goes on a charging document, or would that just be a separate thing we type up?
Sure. What's your feeling on how
Well-
the directors would like to receive any thoughts on this?
I think there's two issues. One is over the last 2 years or so, what the board has taken up is, for lack of a better term, a clean recommended copy and then a red line copy. The red line copy reflects the changes that were made. If it was important to include a margin notice to why something was done, that's where it would appear. And then both would be distributed to the board. Now that is, and to some degree, I'll defer to Jim on this, but my general impression has been, going back to when we were still trying to get these different resolutions in line with the change of bylaws. Forwarding charging documents to the board simply got to the board. Nothing happened. The board, if we send it as a first reading, then, in theory, after a period of time, we could then come back with a second reading. In theory, there would be some debate made within the committee, within the board. Council would probably weigh in, would be my hunch. And we could go from there. So if it's the committee's wish that M09 should be considered with various amendments, then I don't see really a need to worry so much about a charging document. I think if you have a clean version and a red line version that reflects the changes, I can seek that, I would circulate it to the board prior to trying to get it on the agenda. But that's sort of the practice that this board is seeking. That's what we would try to do.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that, and again, you guys are gonna have to remind me what we actually talked about, but wasn't what we did to M09 sort of a stopgap measure? Because it doesn't really address the underlying
That's what they
issue
did before, I think.
where we, because the real issue is the search committee.
Right. That's right.
And then what is it? There's also a problem that because it's actually mentioned in the bylaws, we can't get rid of it yet. So until we can update the bylaws to get rid of it, I think, again, remind me, but I think what our motivation was for doing that is until such time as it's removed from the bylaws, this was our answer to,
Allowing it to be optional rather than
yeah,
mandatory.
yeah, softening the language in there, yeah, to kind of make it more discretionary. So,
But there were other problems too, like the form, the candidate form.
Yeah.
Old.
so my,
Well, and there was, if I may, I think there was some overlap.
Yes,
Between
it
what the
was,
committee on elections was supposed to do, what was in the bylaws, what wasn't in the
what the
bylaws.
secretary was supposed to
Right,
do.
and so the idea was, in broad brushstrokes, the establishment of the search committee would be discretionary, and then we try to clean up the overlap, and
Right.
that would then be the finish line.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is, this is sort of this is more than just a simple red line, I guess is my point. Which is why I was kind of thinking of maybe typing up a kind of a, why did we look at this? Why did we go down this road? Well, we went down this road because we have an issue with this. That's going to take some avenue to correct. So because of that, it causes an issue with this that we felt like needed correction, and kind of explain in a very short couple of paragraphs why we even did this in the first place. So that it gives them context as they're looking at it to understand why we made the change.
Yeah, I can probably include that on the cover sheet for the first reading. You know, maybe if you want to shoot me
Would that
some
be considered the background?
language to include, I can
Yeah.
play with it. But again, I don't know, you know, until we get in front of the board, I don't know that anything is gonna happen, and I'm to say, I'm not sure that how Jim feels about it, because he's got a lot more experience with this than I do. But you know, to send a charging document to the board on a resolution simply says, board, you gotta look at this. Here's a recommendation. Doesn't mean they're gonna do anything. And not knowing what the reaction would be from the committee or from council or anybody else, I think it might be worthwhile to sort of say, well, let's do a first reading, see what we get back. And then if we have to make some more changes, you know, we
Well,
go from there.
and part of this whole process is because now we're into another year, we didn't want to, we've been trying to say, oh, we don't want to wait and then go, oh, the new official election cycle in the new year has now started, and we still didn't figure this out. Now we're 3 years behind on this. So that was the goal, was to try and do it fairly early in the new board agenda. And I can see, you know, maybe not trying to get it on for the September one, but definitely the October, that would still leave the wiggle room. And if they come back with, you know, well, we understand your edits, but we have, you know, questions or more edits that we want, that still gives us time before the February, March timeline when the search committee is supposed to be, you know, January, February, you know, all of that part of our year, to make sure we know what's going to happen with the search committee. Are they going to advertise for it? Are they going to let it go? Or, you know what I mean? Like that, without us getting into that cycle and then going, we still don't have.
Well, I think I'll do it any way the committee wants to do it. That's fine. I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other, but I do think the advantage of getting it on the agenda as a first reading is it does place the onus on the board
Right.
to take up the issue.
So at least, yeah.
If you do a charging document, the charging document gets read, and then nothing else after that happens unless
Right.
there's a next step, which next step
They
would
would
be
have to
the
choose
would be
to
the
put it
first
in,
reading.
right.
So you know, I don't know that a charging document by itself would inspire the sort of discussion that I think the committee would like to get from the board to see whether or not this is a suitable way to proceed. So that's why I think responsibility lies with the board. If the board decides not to do anything going into the new election cycle, then that's their decision.
So before I reinstate the Roberts rules, to be able to officially vote on what we want to do with this, is there any other thoughts or comments from our guests?
I think this thing has been dragging on for so many years. If Keith puts together an executive overview of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and here's what we recommend for the first reading, you should be able to get a move one way or the other. If they're not interested, then just forget about it, leave it the way it is. Because it's their call.
Jim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, excuse me, as far as a charging document, you have to form an action request in that. I think a simple submission for first reading is the action to be taken and go from there. You know, a charging document could perhaps raise the issue of nothing has been done with regard to search committee over the last 2 years. You just completely ignored this, I think, a way that can be said. I don't know that you want to try to cover something like that in a charging document. I think the first reading with a red line copy or a clean copy, both, And perhaps if necessary or thought considered necessary, a separate sheet that identifies particular changes that to be brought to attention. Now, a couple of comments, and I'm going to try to leave it at that. The draft of M09 does have some changes that kind of clean things up a little bit or update them. But there are also changes in that that cannot or should not be ignored. And they're minor in some cases, of course. If nothing else, the current draft or current approved copy has the wrong approval or appointment date for the committee. It's no longer February, it's now March. And I think you'll find other situations in the current version that the same kind of thing applies. So that cannot be ignored and still have a document in the book of resolutions that's anywhere acceptable as far as being complete as to what should be going on. And the final comment I have is, I think, again, this is personal. I think the idea of trying to make the committee optional through a resolution is a no-starter. There is no historical basis for even the wording that's in the bylaws now to consider the committee to be an optional committee in some manner. And in that regard, I would refer anybody who is interested back to I guess February 6, 2022 meeting in which the amendments to the current or to the bylaws at that time and which went into place were extensively discussed in that meeting. It went on for 4 or 5 hours, and our search committee provisions were considered for approximately 40 minutes. And there's no place in there in that discussion to indicate that the board at that time intended for the search committee to be optional in some manner. So I would not support some, again, I'm a guy in the peanut gallery. I want to emphasize that. I would not support an intended approach to somehow make the search committee optional by way of a resolution. Okay, I think that's enough for my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, we're not explicitly trying to do that. I think what we just did is the bylaws requires the search committee. So we just didn't repeat that requirement in the resolution. The resolution talks about if you have a search committee, this is what it will do and this is what it will be. I think what we did was we just specifically removed that. So it's a sin by omission, right? But it's still in the bylaw that it's required. But back to your comment about the date, which date did you say was wrong? Because I thought we fixed that in here.
Maybe you did, but the existing resolution is what I think you did, yes. In your draft, red line draft has changed. What I'm talking about, what I'm talking about, whether it's acceptable to have the current book of resolutions copy to remain the way it is.
Okay.
That's all. That's my comment. And I I think I indicated concurrence, and I think that the next step would be a submittal for first reading, and that in and of itself should bring into question the future of the search committee. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll just say, I think at the July discussion, Jim might have had a couple of other minor
It
things
did. It
that
did.
we want to make sure incorporated.
So I think I've edited this thing 3 times. Yeah,
That's already been done.
Yeah.
Again, I'll try to stay out of any more comments. My view of the red line draft, let me put it that way, as you have before you now, I would go with it as is. I don't have any personal changes that I would want made to it.
So back to this cover sheet idea, which I think is probably the way to go.
Yeah.
I think in that language, it needs to be pointed out that the long-term solution for this, that basically this is just just softens the language, but there's still a requirement for a search committee.
Right.
And just maybe, I could just point out that this has been a source of contention for the past couple of years, because even though the bylaws requires one, we haven't actually had one for a couple of years. And so, if so desired to get rid of it, then it would require a change to the bylaws, which could be a referendum added to the next election cycle.
But they would have to plan for that, right?
But they would have to, yeah, so
Well,
we would need to
yeah.
talk about and plan for it in advance if we wanted to do that. But
No, I don't disagree with any of that, but keep in mind that at the I think the July meeting, I'm not sure, there was a discussion about the board having to vote on whether or not there should be a revision to the bylaws. And I drafted
Generically
something
or just a?
generic, not just on this issue.
Right.
Going back to the governance document, the board was required to act on whether or not there should be a bylaws. Now, we all agree, nobody has any interest in revising the bylaws. I mean, we just did it a couple of years ago. The language that I originally drafted ran into a fair amount of headwind from council. And I redrafted it, sent it back to him. That's why I think I ended up in his spam file, because I never heard back. But I'll get to Bruce on that. That's fine. But I certainly don't want to be in the position of, I don't think the committee wants to be in the position, more importantly, of saying, well, we understand the board's not looking to revise the bylaws. Oh, but by the way, if you do, you need to do this one. I would, and with all due respect to Jim, I understand exactly what he's saying, and he's not wrong. But my recollection is that whatever discussion took place about the search committee some months back, the quick fix that was recommended was, well, we probably can get by with just making it discretionary, acknowledging what the bylaws say, but in essence, sort of within the resolution, punting on the matter and leaving it as that. Now, if the board would decide, no, we should do an examination of the bylaws and see what needs to be examined, this should be on the list, no question. But, we're sort of, you want to avoid being, a little bit pregnant on this, between the two. So that's, just keep that in mind.
yeah, no, I think that's reasonable, but didn't we also talk about, I think this is part of our informal discussion with regard to the bylaws, just in general, of modifying the bylaws to add a provision that said that to do, and I think you actually had the legal language for it, where you just make administrative corrections, that are not
Technically
Oh.
conforming amendments.
yeah, that are not substantive, don't have any substantive impact, on whatever. But, so that in the future, because right now in the bylaws, there's, remember there's a red line, that didn't get totally fixed, and it actually got published that way. Now it's an administrative thing, right? But it's in there, and it's a wording thing that, you look at it, you can just see, it's really, something got lined out, but it didn't get deleted. It's still there. It should have been deleted. So you shouldn't have to, have a resolution voted on by the people to go in and delete that. The thing that was lined out.
With the statute,
Yeah,
someone
so
puts an asterisk and says this was a mistake, but Congress did it. It's in here. We can't fix it. We can't change it.
Way back when I worked up there, when a bill passed, even at a committee, the motion included giving the clerk the responsibility to make technical and conforming changes. I would have to say, and again, I'll defer to Jim on this, but I think to change the bylaws so that within the bylaws, the search committee becomes discretionary is considerably more than a technical and
Yes.
conforming amendment. So
no, I get, I'm not saying that would fall into that category.
Right.
I'm just
In
saying that
general.
if we were going to recommend to the board to make bylaws changes, for example, this issue, and oh, by the way, maybe we need to have an issue, a line in there for technical and conforming changes. And oh, by the way, there's a red line in there that should be fixed. And I mean, we started to talk about this. I just think we just ran out of gas that day, but
Mhm.
just in general, is there anything else in there that if we're going to go into the bylaws, is there anything else that should be tweaked or modified or amended or I mean, it's like, for example, is there, I can't remember, is there still language in the bylaws or maybe not about the sign issue? Is that in the bylaws or is that just in our art guidelines?
Park.
So,
And maybe the DRs as well. But we have
It's
this,
in the DRs.
we can't do anything about the DRs.
yeah,
It's that
so,
individual section.
you know, just in general, if they're up for review, you know, do we just poke around in there a little bit just to make sure there's, while we're in there, that there's not something else that could be addressed? Because again, we could just, if the board decided they wanted to move forward with this, the questions could be added to the next election. They don't have to be a standalone referendum.
Right.
You know, and then once you do that, you don't have to meet the 40% requirement. And it would, you know, it'd be relatively easy. It wouldn't be as painful as the standalone that we had to do for the big one that we did a couple of years ago. Wouldn't,
Jim, my recommendation, and this goes back to when I first got on the committee, this committee, before I was elected to the board. But Jim, my recollection is that the board established a committee initially to go through a wholesale review and recommend revisions to the bylaws, which sort of puttered along for a period of time. And then eventually they sort of disbanded and it all landed in our lap while you were still chair.
Because there was a work group.
Because some sort of, right.
Yes.
Is that, and that's what accounted for us meeting,
twice a month.
yeah.
3 times a month.
Going on for hours
For
after
several
hours after hours.
Several months
So,
in a row.
yeah, is that I would be shocked if the board were to follow that procedure again anytime soon. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I just think
Right.
that's
Well,
down the road. But,
there was a
you know, it's gonna-
work group was appointed by the board. It was under the chairmanship of now former director Doug Parks. And from that work group came a number of topics, proposals. I'd have to get out all the documentation now, came to bylaws and resolutions. And that's where we picked up the topics, the proposals, whatever that came out of the work group, and added it as necessary,
Yeah.
our own provisions added to them. I think we added 1 or 2 or 3 actual bylaws topics beyond what came from the work group. But then we are the ones that took all of that, and in turn, we went to the board with our own
Right.
proposals.
Right.
And the board had some other topics of its own that it did
Yeah.
add. Now, where the search committee, we did not ever get to a detailed discussion of the search committee that resulted anything from this committee, bylaws and resolutions, to the board. That was I cannot explain that other than things perhaps got a little bit rushed at the end. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because that's history.
We have a lot of rabbits here.
Well, my recollection was there was within the committee, there was a discussion about whether or not we still needed a search committee. And the board liaison at the time, even though the search committee itself had recommended they should cease to exist.
Right.
But the board liaison at that time basically said, we're going to imbue the search committee with additional responsibilities, which would make it worthwhile for them to stay in place.
Okay.
And that was about as far as the discussion went. You're correct, I believe, that as a committee, we made no recommendation, but my recollection is that was the extent of the discussion.
Yeah, I agree.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember.
There are
Because I was going to get slapped down.
there are one or two videos that can be dredged up. In one of a meeting involving the board over at the golf course, I did make a comment. Frank Daly was advancing search committee proposals. And I made a comment that we need to be careful that he and the bylaws and resolutions don't wind up in cross purposes of some kind and in effect, confusing the issue. Well, again, nothing ever came. We never got to the point, for whatever reason. Again, we never got to a point for the bylaws resolutions committee made a specific search committee proposal to the board.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep.
Yep.
All right.
Well, just, I guess one more comment here. Oh, by the way, here it is, 5.10, where you have this whole sentence lined out that's still in the bylaws.
Mhm.
So if I'm a novice and I'm reading this, I don't know if that means it's allowed or not. What's lined out is if a unanimous written consent to take action without a meeting is signed by each director. Well, what does that mean that there's a line drawn through it? Does that mean that that's not required? You know, I'm a novice, right? I don't know. What does that mean? Or is that
Not in
just,
the bylaws.
is that just, a weirdo, is it just a weirdo font saying, right? So that's why I'm saying something like that, I think should be corrected. But what started this whole discussion is the fact that it came up on our tractor as being required for review.
Mhm.
But the review requirement is for resolutions, not specifically the bylaws. And I'm just looking through the bylaws now to see if there's anything in the bylaws that says periodic review, but basically in the beginning, it says something like as may be updated from time to time. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's actually.
At the top of
Mhm.
Yeah, well, the way it was, as I recall, the last meeting where this came up was that the committee needed to inform the board that they're required under the governance document
Yeah, but
to undertake whether or not there's necessary to do a review of the bylaws. And I drafted something, forwarded it up. It hit, as I said, some headwinds. After taking into account what council recommended, I tried to redraft it and sent it back to them. And that's where it sits. I haven't heard back. So, but the idea was that the board, and I think the committee both are not interested in undertaking a review of the bylaws. And I would hazard to guess we don't want to do it piecemeal. In other words, we don't want to address, granting the secretary or somebody, the authority to make technical and conforming changes, or however you want to phrase that, or to deal with the issue of whether or not the search committee should or should not be discretionary year in, year out. So on that assumption, we sort of are dealing with the bylaws as we have them, and then we sort of move along. I mean, unless the committee is recommending something else, the committee, tells the board, per the governance document, the time has come to decide whether or not you want to review the bylaws, and the committee recommends you should. Okay, that's fine. But that's not what I had sent in originally, so.
Well, a couple things. One, I don't think the governance document in and of itself is an authority, right? So everything that's on here the authority that's on here now comes from some other document.
Yes.
Like the 2-year requirement is from what, C1 or B1 or something, but that's for resolutions, right? It doesn't say governing documents, right? It says, doesn't it say, book of resolutions. So number one, I'm not sure anywhere in writing there is a requirement on a set periodicity to review the bylaws. So the fact that we put it on our tracker may have just been because to us, it just made sense to establish a date.
Well, yeah,
Do you remember?
I don't remember Jim may, how we got with the 2 year, but we're saying it would be appropriate at a point in time for the board to look at it and say, we don't see a need for it, or we see a need for it.
Oh, yeah.
Ask somebody to review it. That's all it means, is the same thing with the resolutions when you're sending them out to a committee. You're saying, if you're satisfied with what you have, just tell us and leave it alone, but look at it. Tell us you're satisfied.
With the resolutions, I want to say it's in B, I've read it somewhere, I think it's in B01.
B1.
Right.
It specifically says it's a requirement.
Yes.
So we can say, in accordance with our governing documents, you got to do this. And so it's, my only point is, we can't really go to the board and say, hey, there's a requirement for you to review these every 2 years, you need to do that. But to your point, I think it's prudent to say, periodically, we need to take a look at this, because state law changes, other things changes. And if we, again, if whatever the changes we're talking about is just included in a normal election cycle, then it's really no big deal. It's not like we went through, last time were major changes, because the bylaws hadn't been updated in a long time. But what I would not want to see us do is be afraid to make a change to the bylaw, because something else may come along a year or so later and just
keep.
And that's not a big,
yeah, with the idea that we would just compile all these changes at some point in the future.
By that time, it's time to, some new configuration of thoughts and opinions and processes may go, well, now that's not applicable to what we had thought when we originally put that one on hold to wait for more.
Yeah,
And, and then we're
exactly.
back to a vicious cycle of, well, now we gotta relook at it real quick before we add it to, so I get it,
I would like to see us get more comfortable with changing the bylaws for these little onesie twosie things, where you just add it to the election cycle ballot. It's just a
And I
question
think
on there.
people will actually look at them if they're, to vote versus the big block of them
Yeah, we got
where
like
they
20,
go, oh, I
20,
gotta
22
read all of
changes, something
this,
like
I
that.
just wanna
Yeah.
vote for the directors, I just wanna do, you know what I mean? But if it's just one or two at a time or something like that, we may have
Yeah.
a better response or.
Well, let me, just for my clarification. Based upon that, you're gonna have to go back to reinstate Robert's rules, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. Then the committee's not seeking to have the board take action on what is the top line on the governance document about reviewing the bylaws. This will just drop that entirely. Committee is free at any time to recommend to the board that they see a need to make certain changes in the bylaws, whether it's a search committee or anything else. Take it, send it up to the board, and let them decide what to go.
Yeah.
You can include language if you want, but just say that, so in other words, the resolution that I drafted, that council commented on, that I revised, we're just gonna let that die. And then the committee wants to undertake, for lack of a better term, a shopping list of things that, board should consider as revising the bylaws as part of a referendum, whether it's tied to an election or not, that's up to the board. That's different than what we're talking about. So.
Well, that, what you just described is my thinking.
Okay.
What you just, that's my thinking.
Yeah.
And just the fact that we're sitting here talking about it means we're reviewing it. So, I mean, we can update this date. This date doesn't mean we changed it. It just means we looked at it, considered it, thought about it, took whatever action, right?
We haven't looked at it comprehensively.
Charge is to the board.
It's to the board, right? So the board.
So what we're saying is that the board doesn't have a responsibility per se to periodically review the bylaws, but that doesn't keep the board from recommending certain changes to the bylaws at any given time.
Yes. Yes.
The committee's job is to look at it and say to the board, we don't see a need for changes, and that's the end of it. Or the Maryland Homeowners Act changed, and it's in violation now with the bylaws, and we need to.
Right, I mean, but, okay.
Well, just,
your description is the committee recommendation to the board is what I originally drafted, which is
Right.
still sitting there. We're now going a different tact. And we're basically saying that we're gonna leave that aside. We're almost, for lack of a better term, we should probably take this off. Because we're not charging the board with a periodic review,
Right.
but the committee reserves for itself to recommend to the board changes in the bylaws at any given time. And the board would then decide whether or not to
Follow through.
follow through with the referendum or not, you know,
Yeah.
it's a little bit more. That's what sort I'm looking for.
Yeah,
Uh,
the
Come see,
bylaw,
come stop, sort of thing. That, you know, there's nothing that requires a periodic review of the bylaws, so that's.
As far as I know, there's nothing in writing,
No.
unless maybe it's buried in the
And-
DR somewhere, but
let me tell you, this document was created for me. It was given to me by Marty Clark. And I think Doug Parks put it together
Yeah.
originally.
Yeah,
And so all I did was reformat it with the committee.
right,
We brought it to the committee,
Yes,
made
right.
numerous changes.
right.
That's it. So you
Yeah.
can easily drop it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, cause even, you know, we got to like the Declaration of Independence is blank next to it. So I think that's what we should do. With regard to this, is remove it as an action item because technically it's not really a required action item.
No,
But then part B to that is if we do have something that we think, oh, by the way, we as a committee would like you to consider, potential changes to this, and here's why.
and fix the typo while you're there.
And, yeah, and oh, by the way, you know, maybe the answer is not changing the bylaws to say it's not required. Maybe the change is to change the bylaws
Say it's optional.
to make it optional. So if you do have a search committee for whatever reason, then you're gonna follow M9, right? Because that's how this is written. If there is one, this is what you'll do. So, but yeah, that, what you described is my thinking, that we just submit a recommendation from the committee to the board that we think maybe this needs to be looked at to solve this problem. And, you know, we can write up I can write it up, and circulate it to everybody to get your input on, to make sure I didn't screw something up, and then we can give it to Steve, who could include it as a cover sheet, right?
Yeah,
From
well,
the
I
bylaws committee.
would make this observation, again, my observation, but for what it's worth, and Jim, you may want to weigh in on this as well. As to the search committee, I mean, we have language meant to address the issue of the search committee for now. That, I think,
Well, not yet, not until this is done.
well,
The
Yeah.
current M9 is still in place, which may.
yeah, right, but that's what I'm saying. So this could, the search committee issue could come up as a first reading at some point, perhaps followed by a second reading
Mhm.
as a change to, what did we say, it was M09. The other issue of amending the bylaws, I think would be something that the committee could recommend as a charging document, as opposed to a first reading, because ultimately.
Because there wouldn't be a first reading.
Right, because ultimately the board's gonna say, okay, I would assume frankly, that they probably would want council's input.
Yeah.
And then they would say, okay, either council or let me put it another way, bylaws or council will, you know, be charged with coming up with the appropriate language, whether it's bringing the bylaws in compliance with the new M09 or including authority for technical and conforming changes or anything else. I mean, we may want to include a shopping list, but you don't have to do that today.
Right.
I agree. Yeah, I
So, I
agree.
mean, I want to sort of keep the two separate
I think that's
in
probably
terms
better
of how to
too.
proceed.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So,
Well, so kind of back to your idea of a cover sheet though, with an executive summary of what this is, what we did here. In there, we could say that it's, to follow at some point would be, are any recommendations that we would have with regard to possible bylaws changes.
yeah, I mean,
Heads up, coming in the future.
I think I mean, you gotta but I mean, something along the lines of, the committee acknowledges that this change in M09, may necessarily, may require some additional changes in the
Yes.
governing documents.
Yeah.
Without going into too much specificity, and leave it at that. Yeah, I mean, I don't think, but,
it just seems like there would be some, there'd have to be a couple sentences in there, because part of explaining why we did this, part of the reason why we did this
Work around the bylaws.
is that it's a work around to the bylaws, right? So you can't really,
It's
you
really.
can't really
it's
explain
really-
this to them.
It's really to recognize reality, that they haven't appointed a search committee for multiple
several years, yeah.
So I would put it that way,
Yeah.
rather than working around. Don't say.
Yeah, don't say work around.
Think it's a work.
But I mean,
around
that's the
bylaws.
point,
The bylaws
though,
will apply no matter what.
Yeah.
Well,
The
and
bylaws are being.
right, and the problem is you can't eliminate
Right.
the search committee the way they did, for instance, racket sports, because the search committee is in the bylaws.
Right.
The racket sports is not in the
Yeah.
bylaws.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the problem, but
Yes.
yeah, okay, that's.
Okay.
All right, so let's reinstate the Roberts rules and, the four of us, looking for committee members. Does anybody have a good way to make this into a motion, or, what's the thought process that we as a committee would like to, present the updated, edited M09 with suggested edits with a summary sheet, for a first reading, that will go to the directors by way of our liaison, after we have all of that put together, to have them do a first, see if they have it presented as a first reading, and then see what happens after that, if there's next steps or not. If there's a second reading, then those edits would be official then. And then separate, I guess, well, let's vote on that.
Let's do that.
That one
Yes.
portion
Yes.
there. So all in favor of doing that process that I just said, or if there's any clarification on how I worded it, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, no, so that, motion passed unanimously. So then our second topic of, to vote on would be, pertaining to a review of, or creating a charging document to present to the board of directors through our liaison that, at some point will, have the recommendations from our committee on points of the actual bylaws that may need to be looked at by the directors and legal counsel. Exactly how to word that one.
So
As a
is that-
separate
Is that a suggestion that
topic.
we're gonna do all the bylaws? Is that what you're saying?
That we would create, it would not go that part, this portion are about just looking at those fine points in the bylaws themselves, like where it says, having to, required search committee, any of the recommendations that we're, saying that they need to look at, because none of us can change the bylaws. So we would create a checklist for them to say, here's what we as a committee have been looking at, and see that as we update some of these resolutions, there's a little bit of updating that, or reviewing of the main bylaws documents that needs to happen. And let them know which areas that we're.
I recommend we defer that
Yeah, I agree.
until, let's get this in
Do
first.
that one first. Okay.
Because if we're all kind of, in agreement to go down this road,
Right.
then some of us may want to just go back and poke around in the bylaws a little bit, just to make
Right.
sure that there's not. And then after we get this in before the board, and assuming that they read it and second read it and that gets done, we'll,
We'll know where
They may decide not to do it, they may decide to change it, which may make us change what our approach, so I recommend we don't make a hard decision on that.
Okay, so we
I
won't,
agree.
we won't,
Can I think, I don't think the committee needs to say anything to the board about what
Right
you were
now,
just
right,
recommending, putting
right.
aside M09 for a second.
Mhm.
I think the only thing this committee needs to vote on is to strike from the governance document, the bylaws line, making it clear that the board's not under a time constraint of any type to review the bylaws. The
Okay,
committee always has the authority
so is
to make a
that,
recommendation to the board for changes. Now, whether or not the board does it or not is another
so
question.
is that something we,
So I would, in terms of, well, unless you feel it's not, but if the committee's document is
it's our.
the governance document, so the committee would need, I think, as a matter of practice, to take that line out. And then after that, it's your normal business. You don't have to, there's nothing else to do.
So,
You're done.
Yeah, I think that's basically what we would be doing is just deleting the scheduled review date. We don't have to delete the bylaws line because it's a governing document. So we would leave the bylaws, my recommendation would that we leave that line there. And any associated language that's in the comments for us, we just remove in the column under scheduled review date, we just remove that date.
They done
Yes,
As required.
as required.
as required, yeah,
It's
No, it's
simply-
not required.
or as,
No.
Not as required.
At the discretion of the board. That's what it comes
Yeah.
down to. I mean, I would just leave all the dates
I would
out.
just leave it blank.
Yeah.
Leave it blank.
Yeah.
so
So-
as a committee, are we in favor of removing, any kind of a review date for the actual full bylaws document? I can't remember how we.
Yeah, I make a motion that we just delete the review date on the line for bylaws
Okay,
and just leave it
Second.
blank.
That makes sense.
so Keith made the motion, Augie made, seconded it. Any further discussion on it? All of those, in favor of removing the review date from the bylaws line on the governance tracker, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
I just want to make it clear the comments I
All right,
made when you, oh,
Well, let's rescind the Robert's rules at that moment, so there is no
Suspend.
confusion.
any comments I made while Robert's rules were in effect or withdrawn, don't count.
Laura.
All right.
Laura,
I-
Can I make a-
Jim's-
Go
Get
ahead.
back, I don't want to go back and plow old ground, but the recent comprehensive review of the bylaws came about and led to the work group and then the work group to the bylaws and resolutions. That comprehensive review process started from the Bylaws Committee pointing out to the board that there had not been a comprehensive review of the bylaws since the revision back in August of 2008. At that point in time, it was about 2021 or so when that came from this committee to the board of directors. So I'm just trying to kind of reinforce this committee can make that kind of a recommendation at any time it sees necessary. And that could be on a specific bylaws issue as well, not just a comprehensive review. Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't want to divert progress there.
And Jim, that would be consistent with the authority that we have for the bylaws committee resolution, as well as whatever may be in the bylaws themselves, correct?
I would hope it could be seen that way. I haven't got the resolution in front of me, but
Yeah.
it would be
Yeah, I
hard
think
for me.
the committee's free to do that at any point. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my understanding. Yeah. That's always been my understanding.
All right, so any further old business discussion then? All right, there is only one, really one item under new business that I added. And it's because typically we start the conversation now, but as a reminder to us, the annual committee report will be due the end of October. So, and let me show our new committee member what I'm talking about. We basically give a report. We list all of our committee members at that time. We say what terms they're on, all of that, where our liaison is. The second section talks about our major activities that we've done. For us, this will be the reporting period of basically 2023, I believe, right? Or did I not change that date?
23, 24.
I lost track. But we'll hit the highlights of what we do. Some of this may stay the same, like, number 3, the committee maintains and updates governance document tracking form on a monthly basis. So that can remain as one of our tasks that we always do. So, we'll go over that. Section 3 is about, did we encounter any problems or is there any assistance required? 4 is request for items to be included in the next OPA budget. We really we're a committee that doesn't have any big expenses other than we always encourage them to keep offering a virtual option and letting us use Teams for our meetings so that we can have others join us. Number 5 is recommendations for board action. Number 6 is recommendations for committee work in the 2023-2024 session. We will. I'll change it. I know. I guess I saved the PDF before I fixed some of that.
No, I'm talking about M09 is on there to review.
So we'll update that to be the 2024-2025 year. Okay, so that's basically what we'll do. So I can work up a draft, over the next couple of weeks so that prior to our October meeting. Oh, wait, you want it up?
Oh, you took it off the screen.
Chart.
No, I wanted to see the report.
Oh, wait. No, this one. Is that the one you
Here we
wanted?
go. Yeah, I was curious. Okay, thanks.
So Augie, you're good till October of 2025. So we'll be updating our committee names on here as well.
Do you need to be re-upped?
Number
Yeah,
3,
What?
if you scroll down to number 3. Right there,
Mhm.
you started to attach this document to your monthly reports.
Mhm.
That was an addition you made this year
Yeah, to the board.
to give to the board, for visibility.
So in number 3 of that first section, when I talk about the governance document, we're gonna add that we've started attaching it when we submit for posting our approved minutes,
well,
right?
we posted online and we also, after
Email.
each meeting, we email a copy to the board for their reference.
Is that this document?
Okay,
What is it, 3 terms you're allowed to serve?
yes.
And
And then it becomes the extended 1 year, so we're gonna go after that.
then what? You have to be out for 1 term and you can come back in?
That part
I don't know how it
remember off the
works.
top of my head.
Is it just 3 consecutive or
I think it's
3
3
It's a
cumulative?
3-year, 2-year, 1 year, and a possible 1-year extension.
Right,
And beyond that, after you're out a year, I have no idea.
Start all over, I think.
We could start all over, I think.
So,
I decided to try another committee.
yeah.
All right.
So
Big time,
speaking of
big time.
that on the agenda, then I'll just make a mention that,
So this will be my last year.
You can't ask questions.
Okay.
but we have it in,
It's
we
2 year
have it
terms,
in
isn't it?
paper.
This is the
that,
end of my 2nd year term, so that's.
He is, Keith is, nicely and so willingly, I might bribe you with treats, but, has been willing to submit his application for a 3rd term, which is only 1 year, because his term ends, like September 24th, technically. So, I have signed it and endorsed it. Our liaison has signed and endorsed it. And then as we leave today, I'll be dropping it off to Linda, to her mailbox, so that she can add it to the September directors meeting for applications and all of that. So thank you very much, Keith, for being willing to hang out with us for one more year. I'm on my second term. I think when's mine? Mine ends the 2026 in
Back
April,
when
so,
you see it.
yeah. So, but I just wanted to make the note that we are submitting his application, for renewal for his last year, his third term. Now, so then officially, we've been kind of doing it, but is there anything on the governance tracker then that we need to go over today that we haven't talked about?
So just to be clear, so CO2, you haven't received a response, but it's 60 days. 60 days aren't up yet, right?
And you're supposed to send one notice, wait 30 days, send the second notice, and then that gets you the 60-day point. And if there's no response, but what I would suggest, and it's just a thought, is maybe attach this to your second notice so they know what our procedures are.
Oh, I attached that with the first one.
Okay.
So I send them the resolution and the instructions on the first email. And then say, let us know if there's any, changes, or even if there's not, just to acknowledge it, but they don't always, but I have been doing that. I've been sending the instructions plus their actual resolution, so that's on file that they can look at.
So by our next meeting, then if we
there's no
receive no response, we'll update that to review.
Yeah.
C08, gonna change that to reviewed as of the 23rd. C11, same thing as we just talked about,
Right.
for C2. C14,
Waiting on a second.
I'm putting down that our liaison is gonna revisit this with legal. The convenience fee, I put down that September board, first reading at the September board meeting, is that right?
I think that's right.
We haven't seen the agenda come out yet, but
Possible
Doug-
first reading,
when
okay.
Doug messaged me, was his game plan,
Okay.
was that after the annual meeting and all of that
Yeah.
was established, that the first meeting in September,
Okay,
it would be presented.
M9, voted on this, we're gonna submit to the board for first reading. I'm going to type up an executive summary, I'll email it around to everybody first. And then once we all think it's accurate, we'll send it to.
Okay.
You have some sort of red line for M09?
I can pull out one of the previous copies and mark it all up.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yep, I can do that.
Question, process. So we're recommending to the board that they read this document. How does that work?
Well,
No one's standing there reading it to everybody, right?
well,
No,
when I first got on the board, we circulated, there's a call for agenda items, and so you submit those to Linda. And the agenda items and the packet are then at some point are made available to the board members prior to the board meeting. In the last couple of years, there's been an interest in getting agenda items circulated to the board prior to Linda's call for agenda items, in case there's a concern of some kind. So the sooner I get this, the sooner I can circulate it to the board. I would tell them, this is intended to be for the September board meeting. If they have any questions, let me know, that sort of stuff. And it would, I'm always either I would include it, or it would be sent over to council anyway. Probably, you know. That's, seems to be the current practice.
So they would theoretically review it as part of all the other agenda items, so that when they went to the meeting, they'd be prepared to talk about it, vote on
Right.
it, you know,
I think
whatever.
the first reading,
So there's really no vote for that one.
the first reading, there might be some discussion.
Right.
That's always possible. But there would not be and then if there is a need to make some changes and whatnot, that would all be done before the second reading. The second reading would come out with a finished document, which would also be circulated to the board and be included in the packet for whenever it came up. And then ultimately, that would be what would be voted on, you know, yay or nay. I mean, that's sort of where we are.
But the procedures require the board to acknowledge a first and a second reading. And they can't be at the same time.
Okay.
So they have to acknowledge this is the first reading of whatever, whether there's discussion or not. And then at some point after that, they can have a second reading.
As long as it's not a special meeting where the agenda is limited,
Yes.
unless that's the subject matter of the agenda.
So when I look at the racket sports committee, it says liaison to schedule second reading back in June. No one's.
Yeah, because
Well, we had the election.
They eliminated it.
Yeah, what happened was the board voted to just eliminate the racket sports committee and did not follow the appropriate procedure in B01.
for the resolution
Yeah.
itself. So we're
So,
gonna get rid of the committee, but there's a specific procedure to follow for the
and the
resolution.
board did not do that. There's no question that the board voted to eliminate the racket committee. It was a 6-1 vote, so. And when this was called to council's attention, he acknowledged that was an error. And we need to make a fix. As I said,
It just
last time we talked, last 2 times we talked, you know, he said to me, yeah, I gotta, okay, yeah.
It's
but
just procedural.
Nothing has happened since. Yeah.
And we're just a reminder.
It's
That's why it stays there.
Yeah, we brought it up and said, by the way, just procedurally, you need to have you need to schedule a second reading and agree to killing the resolution. You've already
Not
agreed to
just
kill the
committee.
committee, but you need to agree for this process to kill the
It's
resolution.
procedural, but the point is to give people the chance to chime in, right?
Right.
Like if
Yeah, I mean,
people want to come
Yeah,
to the
that's
meeting
true.
and say,
That's
keep
true.
the racket committee, they should hear that.
well, there was some of that initially, but I'm not sure I'm not sure we'll go through that again, but yes, that would be correct.
All right, so the next meeting is October 11th. Does that work for,
Works great for me.
I will not be in country.
are you a traveler too? We have a gallivanter
traveler.
over on this side.
So, well, I have a potential conflict for that day as well,
Oh, okay.
the 11th.
My-
I might be out of state. I'll be in country though.
I'm not traveling anywhere.
But I'll be out of state.
I'm gonna be right here.
All right, so then if potentially then, I don't want to meet if we're not gonna have a quorum, because then it just makes more work for all of us, you know?
Can we move it to the 18th, just the following Friday?
I could do that. I am on call for the hospital beginning 2 o'clock that afternoon, so
What about
if I get,
the day before, the 4th,
which one, the
4th of October?
the first.
The Friday before, I'm sorry.
So that would,
Of course, for me, it doesn't have to be a Friday.
yeah, well, it's what everybody likes and is used to, is a particular week.
And also whether or not this
October.
room's available, that's the other.
I mean, those 3 are fine.
Yeah.
The
that's the
11th,
other
I'm
question.
already
Because
planning to be here the 11th,
Because
but
we want to finalize anything for the October directors meeting, which is on the 26th of October. We need to meet prior to that. So I could probably do the 4th or the 18th.
You know, I'm out the first to the 15th, so I am around the 18th.
So the 18th would work better?
Well, I won't be here the 4th, so.
Okay. So Keith, you said the 18th would work for you?
Works
Does
for
that
me.
work For you?
I might be virtual that day, but
Okay. Let
I'll be
me,
here the weekend before.
let's tentatively, let's
Be here for the
tentatively
meeting that's
say
happening.
the 18th. I just need to double check with Linda to make sure nobody else is already using the room. And I'll let her know that we won't need the room on the 11th.
It's good.
Oh, hopefully. Because we haven't. Be able to, yeah, I should be able to. I should be fine. And then I was also thinking, looking at, I only did, our meeting dates up through December. Do you want me to go ahead and stick with the second Friday, moving forward? And
Yes.
I'll just I'll go through and find all the dates. If there's any discrepancies, I'll let you know from like January to July and just get them on the books too. So we can finish out the rest.
I mean, I'm good with the second Friday. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm good.
It works for me.
I mean, in
so.
general,
Let's see,
I'm
good.
Right.
good.
Okay,
Second
all right,
Friday.
so I'll go ahead, and by the way, Michelle has, is not the person that we will be emailing now, to have things put on the website, she's, now part of the Parks and Rec side, but Linda, for right now, is the one who's in this, so I will be reaching out to her to get all that updated.
Linda
All
Mark,
right. Last call for anything before we decide to adjourn again before three.
Did we-
Woo, we just,
We officially voted.
yeah, right.
I can't remember.
Yeah,
You said
Voted on two things.
right, we did the two
We
votes,
got suspended Robert's rules to put it back in and then,
right.
I don't know where
we
to,
did.
but I guess, you know.
Are you
All
trying
be
to
in the
confuse me
minutes.
Again, I know, look at his notes, he is so good at this. So, Robert's rules back in effect, who would like to make a motion to adjourn at
Motion, so
two
motion,
35?
so motion.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing no objections, we're adjourned.